reason why Shang cannot let go. This is also the city of immorality that God cannot bear to look at. We will go to that city to enact divine punishment. Hearing this, Abraham was stunned. Because his nephew Lot lived in Sodom, he pleaded with the angel to spare his nephew. In response to Abraham's concerns, God instructed the angel to tell him, as long as there are 10 good people in all of Sodom, he would forgive Sodom. If there are not 10 good people, he would also set up an exclusive test for his nephew. The entire city of Sodom is recorded in the Bible as the passers-by on the streets were all scantily clad. Robberies and violations of women's consent, among other things, happened every day on the streets. There were not even 10 good people to be found in the whole city. However, Abraham's nephew, with his kind heart, passed the angel's test. The angels kept their promise. They began to flee Sodom with Abraham's nephew Lot. As they were fleeing the town, the 2 angels, disguised as messengers, descended from the sky with 2 massive fireballs. The fireballs struck down all the bandits in their path. However, when they arrived at the city gate, the messengers told Lot, Sodom is about to face divine punishment. You must not look back at this city of immorality. If you look back, it will prove that there are still desires in your heart that have not been cleansed. God will immediately punish you. But Lot's wife ultimately couldn't resist. She turned back, longing for a glance, and in an instant, she was covered by a white pillar of salt. In the anguish of Lot and his daughters, she became a pillar of salt, and the wicked city of Sodom in the distance was baptized by heavenly fire. It was completely reduced to ashes. This story serves as a warning. Very interesting. Abraham was a real historical figure. However, because of the long time that has passed, all the miracles attributed to him are impossible to verify. So how can we indirectly confirm the authenticity of the Old Testament stories? Or verify whether God exists? Did divine miracles and punishments actually occur? Finding Sodom then becomes important evidence. It is recorded in the Old Testament that the city of Sodom was located to the southeast of the Dead Sea. In 2022, an archaeological team followed the direction mentioned in the Bible and truly discovered an ancient city. This ancient city was grand in scale. It must have been very magnificent in terms of area. After assessment, this ancient city disappeared overnight over 3,000 years ago. It vanished overnight. And strangely, there were many melted sand remnants found at the site, forming glass particles. We have explained this issue in detail before in the context of ancient nuclear wars. We have provided detailed explanations. Only temperatures generated by a nuclear explosion or meteor impact can create such an effect in sand. In India's Mohenjo-Daro, the same situation also occurred. In summary, the Old Testament may indeed record some remarkable figures that existed. After the destruction of the ancient city of Sodom, after being destroyed, Abraham's wife, Sarah, truly gave birth to a baby boy. According to the agreement, the child was named Isaac. When this child was born, some rejoiced while others were troubled. However, this time the roles of the two were exactly reversed. Ishmael's mother could have elevated her status through her son, but now Sarah also had her own child. So her own life was certainly not easy. After all, she was born a maidservant. Her status and position were not as high as the main wife. As time passed, the issues between the 2 women and the 2 children became increasingly apparent, until one day, when Ishmael was close to Abraham, Sarah just happened to see it. The few stood looking at each other. Sarah angrily turned and left. Abraham also chased after her. In the midst of the argument, Sarah told him to decide on the future heir of the tribe. If he could not make a decision, he would go to God for clarification, whether his own son could become the heir of the tribe. Abraham was extremely troubled. He liked both children very much. He also couldn't make a choice. At that moment, God in heaven already knew everything. That night, he sent an angel to inform Hagar, the servant, to let her leave this place, to go to another promised land. There, Hagar would also become the mother of a nation. In the future, her child Ishmael would have 12 sons. Each would become a leader of a tribe. The facts were just as recorded in the Old Testament. Abraham's 2 children. And many years after sending away Ishmael, God gave Abraham an ultimate test. This test was to sacrifice his only son Isaac. Currently, this passage in the Old Testament has a significant controversy surrounding it. Some believe it was God's final test for him. Others believe that Abraham voluntarily sacrificed his child to express his faith. He actively sacrificed his own child. However, the outcome was relatively positive. At the moment of his sacrifice, God's messenger replaced Isaac with a ram. God was also moved by his sacrifice. While Abraham saved his son, he also passed the final test. He truly became the father of a great nation. His descendants were as numerous as the stars in the sky. Among his many descendants, there was a child named Jacob. Jacob achieved victory while wrestling with an angel. The angel was very pleased. Immediately, he bestowed upon him the name Israel. This part, we previously discussed in the context of the relationships among the 3 major religions. There has been a detailed explanation. I won't elaborate on this here. There is a huge doubt. Famine forced the Israelites away from the promised land. They came to Egypt. Here, they became slaves to the Pharaoh. Egypt enslaved them for 400 years. During these 400 years, God seemed to have disappeared. There was no prophet to reach out to him. Abraham and God also became distant memories. That brings us to this point. Many people have a huge question regarding the existence of God. There is a significant doubt. If God exists, why are his people always driven out of their homeland? But if he doesn't exist, why do so-called miracles or divine artifacts appear at different times? To help them reclaim their homeland? Help them reclaim their homeland. Jews at different times have indeed witnessed prophets using heavenly fire, lightning, and strong winds as miraculous signs, leading the Jews to victory over powerful enemies. These visions and manifestations of God led the Jews to firmly believe that the Creator truly exists, that the Old Testament is the final covenant given to them by God. Therefore, they believed that when they could not connect with God, it was certainly because they had violated the covenant, which made God angry. When God is angry, we will be invaded by foreign nations. When they could connect with God, it was because their own group possessed a firm and pure faith, and followed the rules of the covenant, living in an orderly manner. However, from the perspective of outsiders, it was not the same. Looking through the entire Old Testament, you will discover a pattern. God always appears intermittently, as if the network is unstable, and God frequently goes offline, or is often away on business trips. Anyway, God must be very busy every day, and does not have time to constantly watch over his people. The feeling of existence among the people is just like the game apps on your phone. When you're addicted, you should open it and play with it for a while every day. If you don't want to play anymore, just check it every few days. Don't you feel a bit like that? And this point also led to the Jews are often driven out of the promised land. They often have to wander around aimlessly. So everyone, don't question this matter anymore in the future. Since God has chosen you, why do you still suffer so much? The root cause is that God has disconnected. Among the Jews enslaved by the Egyptians, another important prophet emerged. Who is Moses? In the accounts of the Old Testament, Moses is an orphan, because the priests of Egypt had once prophesied that a great prophet would arise among the Jews. He would overthrow the rule of Pharaoh. Therefore, Egypt massacred a large number of Jews in one region. Moses' birth mother, in order to save him from this disaster, placed him in the Nile River. By coincidence, he was rescued and adopted by an Egyptian princess. She also named him Moses, which means, to be drawn out of water. 20 years later, Moses learned that he was not the child of Pharaoh. Instead, he was the son of a slave. He wandered despondently into the area where the slaves lived. As he looked at his tormented people, he felt a deep sadness in his heart. At that moment, an Egyptian was brutally whipping and cursing a Jewish slave. Listening to the cries of the fallen slave, Moses was filled with rage. Unable to endure any longer, he directly killed the violent Egyptian. After coming to his senses, Moses fled the place, and his brother, who had grown up with him, Pharaoh Ramesses II of Egypt, believed that after Moses fled, he could no longer pose a threat to him, so he did not send anyone to hunt him down again. In contrast, Moses successfully escaped to Mount Sinai. He stayed here for 40 years, until one day, the thorn bush outside the tent burned without fire. This also proved that the God who spoke to Abraham had appeared once again.